Thank you, Sean. That was great. Can I repeat again that people should mute their microphone? There is one person, Constanza Ruiz de Peto. Can you mute your button, please? Thank you. I'm delighted about this this seminar, this webinar. Angelo Cardona has organized this. He is a new member of the International Peace Bureau's Council, which is an international body of people that collaborate with the projects of the International Peace Bureau. I am Lisa Clark. I'm the co-president. We have always have two presidents in the International Peace Bureau, a man and a woman, so that we have both sensitivities. In this case, I am hosting you here because I had the most wonderful experience of my life when I came to Colombia just over 3 years ago. I know it was a different historical moment. I arrived in February 2017 for the World Summit of the Nobel Peace Laureates, because the International Peace Bureau is a Nobel Peace Laureate from 1910. I'm old and I have white hair, but I wasn't there in 1910 anyway. And the excitement of the summit festa that was organized in the trade fair grounds called ferias, with 45,000 people came over 3 days to tell us foreigners about how hard they were working on constructing peace in Colombia. I can tell you it was an extremely exciting moment for me and for all the other Nobel laureates and guests who were there from all over the world. It gave us hope, and we wrote in our final declaration of Nobel Peace Laureates, thank you, Colombia. Thank you, people of Colombia, because together you have given us hope. You will remember that the beginning of February 2017 was a bad moment for peace in the world. Donald Trump had just been inaugurated as President of the United States, just to give you one example of how bad it was for peace in the world. But Colombia gave us hope. And I remember having tried to study a little bit about the peace accord and saying how exciting it was that it had been so detailed, that it was so serious, so academic. I spent years in Bosnia during the war, and the peace agreement in Bosnia was absolutely the opposite. It was just let us stop fighting and the armies stay where they are and the territory they've controlled as theirs. Well, the Colombian peace accord is a remarkable piece of negotiation. I also found out that there were still many complaints because there was still violence going on. There were still the heirs of the paramilitary groups that were still threatening and killing community leaders. I heard all of that, but I still kept on thinking that that was a peace process that deserved the support of the international peace movement, especially since it had such a broad support amongst the people in Colombia. Now, I said this and I wrote this, and I know that many of our friends in Europe were not in agreement with us. They could only remember the situation of President Santos when he was Minister of Defense many years before, and they were not willing to look to the positive. But of course now, I think they probably are very sad that they didn't give the peace accord proper support when it was possible to give it to it. But anyway, that I am not the expert here this evening, and that is what we want to hear about, is what's happening in the situation right now. We know that things are not going as well and as positively as they were 3.5 years ago. We are going to hear from, first of all, from Angelo Cardona, who, as I told you, is our International Peace Bureau Council member. But then we have two really important and welcome guests that are going to tell us more from the inside. I think we're going to hear first from Victor de Currea-Lugo, who is a physician. He's a doctor, but he's also a master in political, he has a master's and a PhD in political science. He has worked in Colombia, in Palestine, in Bolivia, in Darfur, and Western Sahara, among other places. So he is a person who, like some of us also, I'm older, but I've been around in many of those places too. And so he has the feel of what a population building a peace process is all about and what some of the risks are. We're very much looking forward to hearing about him also because his most recent book is How Peace Was Negotiated, Lessons Learned from the Government FARC Process. After that, we will be hearing from Iván Cepeda Castro, who is a senator and who is the co-president of the Colombian Senate's Peace Commission. He is also a human rights and peace defender, and he's a co-founder of Let's Defend Peace and of the movement of victims of state crimes. I must say, I found particularly important how the whole aspect of the victims was addressed in the Colombian Peace Accord. I think that was so innovative and exciting. And so perhaps Iván can tell us something about that as well. He was one of the facilitators for the peace talks, especially with the government and the FARC, and also with the government and the ELN. So right now I'll give the floor to Angelo Cardona, who will conduct from now on. Thank you all for being here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you all.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I was kicked out of the call. I'm not sure what happened with my internet connection. It seems something happened with my laptop. But well, I'm back on the call. So no, just was going to say I kind of missed what Lisa said as the system kicked me out, but I'm not sure if you already gave a bit of a background of the peace agreement. Lisa?
Yes, I said how excited I was and how admirable the peace agreement was. I didn't go into details. I just mentioned how innovative the treatment of victims and reparations was.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, no, just I just would give a bit of a background of the peace agreement, which was signed in 2016. However, we have had always constraint, which is the Colombian opposite party, which is pretty much the far right, mostly people that's opposing to the implementation of the agreement. But as well, there is a very important point, because since the implementation of the peace agreement, roughly 700 social leaders and people who have been advocating to implement the peace agreement have been assassinated. This is a systematic killing of people supporting the peace agreement. So that's as well very worrying about this peace agreement, because there are no guarantees for the people who works towards implementation of the agreement. So that's a very concerning point. As well, the fact that in 2018, the Colombian government changed, and now we have a new government, which is the Iván Duque Márquez government. Obviously, we know this party, which is the Democratic Center, is pretty much the party that's led by Álvaro Uribe, and they are opposing to the implementation of the peace agreement. So that has been as well tough for the people at the Congress that's working towards supporting the implementation of the peace agreement, and as well the peace movement in general in the country. But we have been mobilizing as well throughout the years. We have organized protests in different cities of Colombia, as well around the world. We have received support from different organizations and Colombians that are living outside who organize and always cooperate with the efforts to advance in implementation of the peace agreement in Colombia. And there is a key transitional justice system which was agreed in Havana, which is a special jurisdiction for peace. And this transitional justice system has received different attacks from the current government trying to undermine the system. And obviously people who are supporting the agreement has come out to the streets, has supported the implementation. I did co-founded the movement called Yes to the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, which seeks to protect the special jurisdiction for peace, basically doing protests in different cities of Colombia. And we have received as well support from people outside and directly from the Congress itself with the Parliamentarians for Peace. So it's been as well a tough journey, but we are working hard to make that happen. Now, I would like to give the floor to first to Victor, which I would like him to explain us a bit of what he thinks about is the current status of the implementation of the peace agreement. And so I'll give the floor to him first. So go ahead, Victor. You are on mute.
Give me a second, please. Good morning, good afternoon in Europe. Thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this discussion. I would like to my speech. First of all, I'd like to remark some elements that we used to call in Colombia semantic debates. I know that you are familiar with the Colombian and the Latino tradition. I really enjoy fighting and at the end it makes sense, but we really enjoy. Let me start for this to mention one of the biggest problems when we talk about the peace building in Colombia is what the meaning of the word peace. And this is two different approaches. It's like what happened in the discussion in the Philippines case. For some people, peace means social justice, development, human rights, and democracy. But for the elites in Colombia, many of them, peace means that the mobilization of the armed groups. Means if you stop the armed conflict, it is peace, and we don't have any more to discuss about the meaning. And I see that the most important is to take into account that the big success of FARC is that in the negotiation table, for the first time of the Colombian history, there is a discussion about substantial issues like property of land, political participation, illegal cultivation, and respect and recognition of victims. It didn't happen in the previous peace process between different guerrilla groups and the Colombian government. And the second is in this way, what is meaning of implementation? You know, for the defender of the peace process, we really believe that implementation means a comprehensive task. But for the elites, with the support of a lot of media and even think tank, the comprehensive implementation was reduced just to a demobilization of the guerrilla groups. And later on, this demobilization was reduced just not to kill the guerrilla members, the former guerrilla members. Means it seemed like the main goal today, despite all this wonderful agreement, is not to allow armed groups, extreme right groups, right wing, to kill the former combatants. And it cannot be. I mean, we cannot play this game to reduce the integrality to comprehensive implementation goal just not to be killed. This is part of the semantic debate that I would like you to take into account. The second element to take into account is about the obstacles. I see that we have some obstacles which prevent us fulfill implementation. The first of them is the past plenty of failures. As you may know, Colombia had peace process, a lot of peace process in the 50s, in the 60s, sorry, in the 80s, in the 90s. And more or less in some of them, we can conclude to make sure the analysis that is the concentration of the rebels, give up the weapons, sign a paper, make a cocktail. The cocktail is really important in the Colombian tradition. And later the killing of the commanders, you know, on the persecution of the leaders and not to implement anything in favor of the society. This is really one of the big issues. I mean, and now when we talk about the eventual peace process with the National Liberation Army or with dissident of FARC, they will point out the bad experience of FARC that is going on right now. The second point is about the war on terror. I mean, war on terror not only affected the logic of how to understand the conflict and but also how to implement peace. We saw that in Chechnya, in Palestine, and in everywhere. But in the Colombian case, to reduce the social and armed conflict just to an armed conflict, and later on to present the armed conflict just as a terrorist issue, was the government, the former government of Uribe was really success, let's say, to guarantee this transformation in the narrative. And at the end of the day, we lost the perspective to talk about social and armed conflict. The other is the media. You know, we have in Colombia a lot of right-wing media that they are not journalists. They are making publicity every day about the peace process. This lack of media, independent media, to inform properly to the society is one of the biggest obstacles that we have. And also the military doctrine. One of the biggest problems is that despite all this effort to change our reality, the military doctrine is exactly the same based on the school by USA, but also the idea of the Cold War, that we have an internal enemy and there is not civilian, but just rebels. And this really produced a lot of impact when we try to analyze the discussion. Now, I would like to say sorry, I make a mistake at the beginning. We talked to Iván in yesterday, and we agreed that he will present the good elements and the positive elements, and my task is to present the bad elements. It doesn't mean that we disagree. It's just we divide the task of the presentation according to our own nature. As he knows that I am a little bit pessimistic, I am in charge of that. It doesn't mean that we reject, or in my side that I'm rejecting the peace process. Well, about the implementation, what is really worrying is that, first of all, there is not a governmental proposal for the legal development of the agreements. So far, we don't know what is the legal proposal of the proposal of the legal development, the legislative development of the agreement for the current government of the President Duque. And this is really it showed the lack of will to build to develop the agreement. And also the territorial approach. You know that Colombia is a country of region, as many countries in the world, but we have some regions more affected than others by the armed conflict. But we insist too much in the need to make a territorial approach. But this territorial approach so far has been conducted thinking about the public order, about the military response to the situation rather than the social one. When we talk about land, we are really pessimistic, let's say, because the land delivery so far is only 0.008% of the goal. Means this big issue, when we talk about agricultural reform, we are talking about one of the most important issues of the Colombian situation. The gap of poverty and the gap of inequality between rural and urban areas is a huge issue, and part of the agenda of FARC was how to develop the rural area, is how to modernize the rural area. Is not related to the communist project or socialist or Chavez project, not at all. It's just how to bring decent capitalism to the rural area. But as you can see, the advance of the land delivery according to the peace process is really few. And also it was created a strategy called development plan with a territorial approach The idea is to create some kind of legislative and institutional tools which allow the government to increase the capacity of the regions. But now the current government is talking about future zones. Future zone is not part of the agreement, and it's clearly how they try to dilute, to divert the discussion about what the agreement said and what the government wanted to present as a success. And one of the biggest problems is that the discussion of the comprehensive approach to develop the agreement is really a strong issue in the discussion about agricultural reform. It's not a matter of cosmetic issues. And my personal opinion is that I don't see a development, an integral development of the project. Right now, we see that in the rural areas, there is not this feeling of advance of the peace in the implementation. Of course, we should admit that now the level of violence has decreased severely, what is positive, but this is not enough. We don't implement another kind of measures. About participation, the only, you know that the government had, the former government, Santos, he received a special mandate during 6 months called fast track in order to develop some I have a problem with this word, okay, whatever, the legal development of the peace process. But unfortunately, the Congress didn't support a lot of initiatives, and we have only one, and is the rule for opposition groups. There was another proposal in the peace process, was a special temporary like electoral district, 16 electoral districts to be given to the communities in the rural area, the most affected by the armed conflict. But the government, the current government, the current Congress have not supported the implementation of this electoral district. This is not seats in the Congress for former guerrilla groups. It's to give 16 seats in the Congress to the communities, the most affected communities by the armed conflict. It's part of to make stronger the democracy, but we didn't success to do that. And of course, in the matter of the participation, as Angelo mentioned, the killing of the former combatant of FARC, as well as the leadership, the social leadership, the human rights defender, the leader of the Black communities, the leader of the farmers organization is really a huge issue. We have so far 214 former combatants of FARC that has been killed. And there is one problem, as the presentation of the government is that they has been killed by the other guerrilla groups, or they has been killed by, criminal gangs, but not the responsibility of the state. Even by omission, the state is responsible for what is going on with the former combatants on FARC. About the topics of drugs, it's like we see positively, like the families involved in the voluntary eradication of the cultivation of crops, of coca crops. They have fulfilled this commitment in 96%. But in the other hand, the government insists too much in the forced eradication of crops, despite that all the agreements, even in the local level, in the national level, what is included in the agreement. There is not a policy in favor of the voluntary eradication of crops. And in this way, to force eradication just contribute to criminalize the farmers. One of the biggest problems is that in Colombia, the narrative is trying to present in the same level of responsibility the drugs cartels and the farmers which are produce coca. It's not the same to farm coca than to produce cocaine. And they don't even understand the need of a comprehensive analysis, including not only production of coca leaves, but also the distribution in the international market. And of course, one of the biggest problems is that we depend too much on the United States policy related to the drugs issues. And the short-term strategy will fail because Colombia has not a clear strategy in the long term about drugs. If you follow the experience in Afghanistan, how we failed, we will repeat the same path in the Colombian issues. The results, well, the question is that I know how important it is for the international community to bring good news. And sorry, Lisa, I'm a little bit pessimistic, but for me, it's not matter of just how to resolve the problem of unemployment of some thousand of guerrilla members. We are talking about a conflict that more than 50 years, and if we go to the roots of the conflict about the exclusion in the civil and political participation, if we go to the exclusion in the economic and social level, taking into account that Colombia is one of the most biggest inequality countries in the world, that level of violence conducted by the elites through the paramilitary groups and as well as the army, I'm really, few optimistic. Now, we can say some projected projects in the analysis, but the projects is like paving some roads or to adequate some use for solar energy, or even they present as a part of the implementation to bring some food to the COVID patients. And I think that this is not exactly what we can call as a real implementation. Finally, I think that I have just, I have like 7 minutes, is correct? Still, or I already passed my time? Someone can tell me, please?
Angelo, tell him, did you check the time when he started?
Okay,
Keep on going, keep on going.
Okay, I will. In that case, you can just shut down my microphone. Okay, and I think that there is also, now, this is now, and I think that Iván is more precise to show the big effort made by the sectors in favor of the peace, the opposition in the Congress, and the communities in the rural area. When you, despite all what I say, that I didn't regret, I don't regret at all what I say, when you go to the rural area, you see this hope in the communities in Catatumbo, in Arauca, in Cauca, in some region of Colombia. This hope, the level of organization of some youth people, indigenous, Black communities, farmers to support the peace process, and how in some extent has been possible to change the mentality of the communities, supporting the dream of other country, that other Colombia is possible. I see that this makes sense, all the efforts made so far about the peace process. I want to close my intervention, mention just some traps. The first one is to try to conditionate the welfare state to a peace agreement. Let me be precise. The welfare state, human rights, and democracy is a responsible of the Colombian state, despite if we are in war or in peace. And there is a trick to present like, well, we will guarantee some level of welfare state if the peace agreement, no, it's not related to the peace agreement. And I think that this is one of the tricks. The second trick is the government, is not only that the government don't want to implement the process, is that the government deliberately, systematically, and publicly, they want to destroy the peace process. Means it's not only matter of not implement, it's matter of develop activities in order to delete, for instance, the history of the conflict, or to deny the root causes of the conflict. The third one is like the problem of the cosmetic steps. I know that there is not possible to build Rome in one day, but it doesn't mean that we can do steps, like just small steps, and to present it as a good step, especially for the international community. And I see that all of you, people that are listening to me in that moment, are part of our hope. If you push too much your governments, please, that demand from the Colombian government real steps, not only cosmetic steps. The next discussion is about some people say, Victor, don't be so pessimistic. It's a matter of time. And well, I am really afraid because we have in Colombia a sentence. I mean, according to the breakfast, you know how will be the lunch. And in the first step, we don't see clearly that is a statement or steps or a political decision to implement what is going on. It means, I know that it's a matter of time, but in some extent, some areas has been implemented right now. For instance, it's more than 300 members of the former guerrilla, the former guerrilla FARC that are still without freedom. It's around 150 that are still in jail. And this is a big issue. And it's a matter of to make a political decision. We finished this process more than 3 years ago to continue with people in jail, and they has been accepted as a member of FARC. The other is, the government create a figure called peace with legality. Peace with legality is the new strategy of the government, but honestly, I don't understand what they wanted to say, because they like to take for granted that the former peace was without legality. And this is really, I will summarize, say, like the proposal of peace for the current government is just to make peace using the criminal code. This is what I wanted to say. And now, for me, one big issue that we have really to be self-critics is that we sometimes confuse between mobilization for peace, what is good, and peace movement, and it's totally different. And not because a lot of people take part in the demonstration or take part in the forum or go to the conferences or discuss, it means that we have a peace movement. And I think that one of the biggest issues has been the capacity or the lack of capacity of leadership to create this kind of peace movement. There is huge examples, that is positive examples. I think that, for instance, Iván has lead one important project called Defendamos la Paz, that is a platform of different views, different political approach to be together to fight for the implementation. And finally, my biggest concern, and maybe this is the biggest lesson learned for the Colombian conflict, is that the negotiation was made based on the real agenda of the Colombian situation: land, political participation, drugs, victims. But the implementation has been done based on the mobilization approach. Give up the weapons, concentrate the army, the rebels, and period. And this is one of the biggest problems. It's matter of the approach. It's not matter of the small details. We can go to discuss details, but the broader debate, what I think that is the relevant issue, is that we need to solve the problem, the lack of links between negotiation and implementation. And I think that the other countries has the also a lot of things positive to be learned from the Colombian experience, but also the negative one. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Angelo. And I hope you understand what I try to say.
Thank you so
much from me. But Angelo, I think you should, I was cut off for a few minutes, but just this last bit. So I found you absolutely wonderful, even though you are pessimistic compared to me. I'm looking forward now to hearing Iván with his optimism.
Okay.
Angelo.
Yeah. Bueno, ahora queremos escuchar la opinión de Iván.
Bueno, muchas gracias a Lisa y a Angelo y al International Peace Bureau y a quienes están hoy en esta sala virtual siguiendo con interés lo que pasa en mi país, y agradezco también la presentación de Víctor, que nos permite contrastar opiniones sobre un proceso muy complejo, por supuesto.
Okay, so thank you so much for all the people that's here, for the International Peace Bureau, for the invitation, and for being attentive to what's happening in Colombia, and to Victor, who gives his insights and we can debate on them.
¿Cómo podemos definir el proceso de paz que se está dando en Colombia? Es la pregunta que quiero intentar resolver rápidamente en estos minutos. A cuatro años de su implementación.
How can we define the Colombian peace process after 4 years of its implementation? That's what I will try to tackle.
Yo creo que, como todo proceso de paz, es un proceso político, social, cultural, humanitario extremadamente complejo y contradictorio.
I think that this process as socially, economically, and personally is a bit contradictory in its complexity as well.
Esa complejidad tiene muchos elementos, tiene victorias y derrotas, tiene avances y retrocesos, tiene momentos de crisis y de auge político, como los que hemos vivido desde que comenzó la negociación en La Habana hasta el día de hoy.
Okay, that complexity involves a lot of elements, a lot of victories, defeats, and good news, such as the signing of the agreement in Havana.
Tiene elementos de oposición política válidos en la democracia, pero también tiene ataques criminales. Ya Víctor habló de esos ataques, más de 200 combatientes o excombatientes asesinados y más de 450 líderes comunitarios y sociales en los territorios defensores de la paz también asesinados. Tiene momentos de manipulación de la opinión pública, de mentiras que se dicen sin ningún rubor ante la opinión. En fin, es un proceso, repito, de contradicción política.
Okay, it has an element of political opposition and criminal attacks, of course, as Victor has mentioned. It has more than 250 ex-combatants and more than 450 people killed. Obviously, there's a bit of a manipulation from the media as well. So as I said, this has a political element in there.
Pero sobre todo creo que es un proceso democratizador de la sociedad. Creo que eso es lo más importante. Colombia ha vivido 4 años en los que ha expandido el espacio político de la participación y creo que ese es un primer elemento que quiero rescatar. Hoy Colombia no ha dejado de ser un país violento, no es que haya desaparecido el conflicto armado, pero es un país en el que ha habido una discusión democrática con muchas dificultades profunda, que es fundamental.
Overall, I think this is a democratic process. Colombia hasn't stopped experiencing violence, but we have seen advancements in democracy and how people exercise it. Colombia is a country that has shown advancement in democracy through this process. That's the first element I want to add.
Sí, digo que es democratizador, no que hayamos conquistado la democracia.
It's a democracy.
Sí,
it's a democratic process and has fostered democracy. Right.
¿Y en qué se expresa eso? Digamos, políticamente, ¿en qué se ha expresado ese efecto democratizador del proceso de paz? Bueno, primero en que es el proceso de paz en el que más hemos debatido públicamente, refrendado, votado, discutido en el Congreso leyes, refrendado en la Corte Constitucional esas leyes, vuelto a discutir sobre las mismas leyes. No hay un proceso en Colombia, y yo no sé si en el mundo, tal vez seguramente así será en otras partes, que haya sido más deliberado que este proceso de paz que hemos tenido en Colombia.
Okay, how it translates in the peace process in which we have debate probably the most compared to other peace processes probably in the world and in the attorney's office and in the parliament. So has been a very participatory process.
Perdimos el plebiscito por 50,000 votos. Volvimos a negociar el acuerdo. Tuvimos que llevarlo al Congreso. Después lo llevamos a los consejos municipales. Hay consejos de ciudades, pequeños pueblos que han votado el acuerdo de paz y lo han aprobado. Y después de eso hemos vuelto, repito, una y otra vez a discutir leyes que todavía estamos discutiendo. Acabo de terminar este periodo del Congreso y acabamos de rechazar un nuevo intento por modificar la Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz.
Okay, we have lost the plebiscite by roughly 50,000 votes against. We renegotiated. There are municipalities, councils that have taken as well participation in the process. We still continue to debate. There are laws that we still debate. For example, one that we have debated recently was in order to protect the special jurisdiction for peace.
¿Y el resultado de todo eso cuál es? ¿Por qué es tan importante? Bueno, yo rescataría un par de elementos o tres elementos con los que quiero dejarles un mensaje. El primero es que ha surgido una nueva conciencia en Colombia sobre el conflicto armado, la paz, las víctimas y la importancia que eso tiene, especialmente en los jóvenes colombianos, en las nuevas generaciones, que se preguntan cómo es posible que hayamos vivido medio siglo de guerra sin que haya cambiado eso.
There are, so what is the result of it? I'll pick three elements. I'll leave you with three elements. The first one is that there is a new perspective of the armed conflict, and especially in young people, how they see now the conflict and how this conflict with roughly 50 years has impacted Colombia.
Un segundo elemento es que hay una comprensión hoy más profunda y más amplia de cuáles han sido las causas y las consecuencias del conflicto armado en todos los niveles de la sociedad. Y hay hoy una nueva discusión sobre la memoria del conflicto armado o sobre la negación de lo que ha ocurrido en el pasado. Hay un debate social, un debate público que amplía el conocimiento sobre todo esto.
Okay, the second element that I would like to tackle is that there is now a better understanding of what's the armed conflict, of the causes of it, and the consequences of the armed conflict. So now there is a social debate around it.
Pero lo más importante de eso, digamos, sobre lo que me quiero enfocar es en el reconocimiento y en el espacio que han ganado los sectores sociales que han impulsado realmente el proceso de paz. Y voy a mencionar tres sectores sociales específicamente.
Okay, so the most important thing that I would like to tackle is the inclusion of social sectors and the spots that they have gained in the implementation. So I will mention three sectors particularly.
Las víctimas, los líderes sociales que han sido asesinados y que fundamentalmente son los pueblos indígenas, afrodescendientes y los campesinos. Ese es un segundo sector. Y el tercer sector son las mujeres. Víctimas, líderes sociales comunitarios y mujeres.
Okay, so the victims, the social leaders that have been killed, particularly indigenous people, women, and social leaders.
Gracias a esos tres sectores es que el acuerdo de paz es lo que ha sido. Y gracias a esos tres sectores es que se han producido esencialmente los avances en el proceso de paz. Y voy a mencionar algunos de ellos a continuación. Ellos lucharon en la mesa de conversaciones para convencer al gobierno y a la guerrilla que había que incluir los enfoques esenciales del acuerdo de paz.
Okay, so there are those three sectors have been the fundamental part of this agreement. We have made some advancement with them, as they were able to talk at the peace negotiations and put their inputs and insights on the negotiating table.
Por eso es que los están matando, porque son los principales sujetos del proceso de paz. No se podría entender que hayan asesinado, algunos dicen como la ONU, 450 de esos líderes, mujeres y hombres, otros dicen cerca de 800. La única posibilidad de entender esa matanza, esa masacre, es porque son los sujetos de la paz.
Okay, that's why they are being killed, as they are the main actors and the main figures of this peace treaty. And if we take a look at the statistics, some say 450, some say around 800 social leaders killed. The only way to understand this assassination and this genocide pretty much is that they are the main actors of the peace agreement, and that's why they are being assassinated.
Voy a mencionar entonces cuál es el resultado de esa movilización de esos sectores. El capítulo de justicia y de verdad, reparación, no repetición del acuerdo de paz que hay en Colombia es un capítulo único en el mundo, y que precisamente ayer el representante de la ONU para los derechos a la verdad, la justicia y reparación decía que Colombia es el laboratorio hoy en el mundo de la justicia transicional.
Okay, just a moment. So I want to talk about the chapter of the justice, reparation, and no repetition, which is a unique chapter in Colombia. And yesterday, the UN representative said that Colombia at the moment is the laboratory of the transitional justice system in the world.
La Justicia Especial para la Paz tiene hoy registradas 260,000 víctimas, 12,500 perpetradores, entre los cuales 9,500 son guerrilleros o exguerrilleros y 2,600 son militares, en su gran mayoría, y agentes del Estado civiles. Y hay 2,800 peticiones pendientes para registrar agentes del Estado que cometieron graves crímenes, lo cual podría llevar a tener 15,000 perpetradores ante esta justicia.
Perdona, te pregunto nuevamente, Iván, solo para confirmar, ¿dice 260,000 víctimas? All right. Okay, so at the moment, this transitional justice system, or the special jurisdiction for peace, has 260,000 victims registered, from which some of them are the military. We have around 2,600 militaries and agents of the state. And that could pretty much put around 50,000 perpetrators on the spot.
Ha producido 28,600 decisiones. Próximamente producirá las primeras sentencias sobre 7 macrocasos que reúnen a esas 260,000 víctimas.
Hold on. Okay. It has produced 28,600 petitions, and shortly we will execute 7 huge crimes.
Que agrupan a las 260,000 víctimas. ¿No? Están agrupadas en 7 grandes casos.
That are part of the 260,000 victims.
Y al lado de ese sistema de justicia, que es una institución muy grande, importante, que no va a poder revisar todos los casos y no va a poder satisfacer a todas las víctimas, que son 9 millones en Colombia, pues está la Comisión de la Verdad y está el Sistema General de Verdad, Justicia y Reparación. No voy a explicarlo en todos sus detalles.
Bárbara, ¿puedes repetir un momento? Aparte de eso, ellos no podrán, pues, con todas las víctimas, que son 9 millones. ¿Cuáles son los otros mecanismos que hay?
La Comisión de la Verdad y la Unidad de Búsqueda de Personas Desaparecidas. Y los mecanismos de reparación. Son los 4 componentes del sistema.
Okay. So, parallel to the special jurisdiction, to this justice system, which will aim to judge 9 million people, which is pretty much the victims of the Colombian armed conflict, there will be other bodies that will be supporting, which is the Truth Commission and the Unity of Disappeared People, which will be, and the reparation system. All of those systems will be tackling the whole justice system for the victims.
Bueno, voy a rápidamente resumir algo que tiene que ver con los otros 2 sectores que he mencionado. Las mujeres lograron imponer en la mesa de La Habana, en la mesa de paz, la perspectiva transversal de género del acuerdo. Es decir, que todos los puntos del acuerdo deben contar con esta perspectiva.
Okay, I'll mention the other 2 sectors. So the second one is women, and pretty much all the points on the agenda will have this transversal perspective of women in it.
Y lograron imponérselo al gobierno, que era una delegación machista, y a la guerrilla, que era otra delegación machista. Es decir, que hubo una victoria de las organizaciones de mujeres en la mesa de paz.
They were able to impose on the agenda their perspectives of women. As we know, the Colombian and the guerrilla were machist movements, so the women were able to impose their voices in the agenda.
Hoy están luchando las mujeres porque se abra un macrocaso en la Justicia Especial para la Paz sobre la violencia sexual, que ha sido gigantesca en el conflicto armado colombiano y que debería ser el 8º caso que se abra en esta justicia. Y están luchando para que el catastro, que está acordado como parte de la reforma rural, pueda incorporar la propiedad sobre tierras de mujeres campesinas y rurales.
Okay, so they are fighting now to open a case against sexual violence, which has been massive in this agreement. They are requesting for this, and I think this should be the 8th case to be open in this agreement. And they are pretty much putting their perspective in the implementation of the agreement. Go ahead.
Por último, los sectores rurales, los indígenas, los campesinos, están luchando por lograr que los planes de desarrollo integral se hagan realidad, a pesar de que el gobierno no ha querido avanzar en ellos, con un ingrediente además peligroso en esta última etapa, que es la presencia de tropas estadounidenses en esos territorios donde están esas comunidades.
Okay, now I'll mention lastly the indigenous farmers. They are fighting for the comprehensive plans or implementation in their communities. At this moment, this represents a risk, as at the moment there are U.S. troops in these locations.
La presencia estadounidense en esos territorios, bajo la forma de una brigada asesora del Comando Sur del Ejército de Estados Unidos, es para oponerse al proceso de paz.
Okay, the presence of U.S. troops in those territories under the supervision of a mission of the United States troops in those locations represent a threat to the implementation of the peace agreement in those areas.
Y significa que ni siquiera con todo el poder que tiene el ejército, las fuerzas militares y los grupos armados en estos territorios han podido romper la resistencia de esos pueblos que están en esos territorios. Y por eso han llamado incluso a una presencia extranjera militar.
Okay, and that means that with the presence of military actors in those locations, they haven't even been able to undermine those armed groups. Now they have called on the presence of a foreign military in those territories.
Para mantener la política de la guerra contra el narcotráfico, que no es tal guerra, es una guerra contra el campesinado y las poblaciones rurales de Colombia.
In order to keep the policy against narco-traffic, that is not such a policy against narco-traffic, but it's a policy against the farmers and indigenous people of Colombia.
Entonces, voy a decir una última frase, y es la siguiente. Que el gobierno y las élites de Colombia no quieran cumplir el acuerdo de paz o implementarlo es algo obvio, natural. No quieren actuar en contra de sus intereses, por supuesto.
The government, the fact that the government and the elite doesn't want to work towards the implementation of the peace agreement is something obvious. They don't want to work on them because it goes against their interest.
Pero lo importante es que el acuerdo de paz está provocando la movilización de la sociedad, su participación, y que a 4 años del acuerdo, el acuerdo no ha podido ser destruido. Y por el contrario, yo creo que sigue avanzando, incluso en las condiciones de la pandemia.
What I think is very, very important is that despite that 4 years and all the attacks that they have received, still we see mobilization from the civil society in order to foster the implementation of the peace agreement. So I think that's a very important point as well, the one that Ivan is mentioning. I completely agree with that.
Y con esto finalizo.
Okay.
Sí, la paz, decía Eleanor Roosevelt, todos la queremos, todos la deseamos, pero hay que trabajar duro para conquistarla. Y nosotros en Colombia hemos tenido un estado que se dice democrático, pero que ha tenido una guerra durante más de medio siglo. Y es un estado profundamente autoritario, profundamente militarista, profundamente conservador y reaccionario, profundamente guerrerista. Y lo estamos derrotando con este proceso de paz que yo creo abre la posibilidad de unas transformaciones que vamos conquistando poco a poco. Es eso.
Okay, so I want to finish with a phrase from Eleanor Roosevelt, which says that we all want peace, but we have to work hard in order to find it, in order to get it. And even though we say that we live in a democracy in Colombia, truth is that we live in an authoritarian state, a completely militarized state that's been trying to spend their own rules. But despite that, I think the Colombian peace process goes and advances little by little, even when we are facing the COVID-19 crisis. So with that, he finishes his intervention. I'll open up the floor for questions. If any of our participants wants to ask a question, if it is addressing to Ivan and Victor, just say both of them, or if it goes to someone in particular, just let us know, and we will go ahead and answer the questions. So we'll go ahead and answer the questions.
Can I, as we wait for the questions to come, I would like to thank Victor and Iván extremely. I mean, really, really from the bottom of my heart. Victor with his pessimism, but it's not that kind of pessimism. I know that he's working for the right things, and there is a considerable amount of agreement. And Iván, who tells us that in 4 years they haven't managed to destroy our peace agreement, it means it's strong. It means it's still going. And I think that at this point, perhaps the Colombian people, those wonderful people that I met 3.5 years ago, and who were so excited about their peace agreement, need our support. They need the support of peace movements from the rest of the world to help them out, just to stand by them and support them. There are some extraordinary elements in those peace accords, like finally land ownership in the countryside to women. The women, the campesino women, were so excited about that, and they told me all about that. And this is something that this is the basis of what peace is all about. As you both said, Victor and Iván, there are the people, the government thinks, or many people in the elite believe that peace is just when armed groups are no longer fighting. Well, we do not believe that. We believe that peace means a basic socio-political setup that enables people to express their rights, to enjoy all their rights, and works towards a better future for themselves and their children and the future of society. Thank you so much. I say what Angelo just said and open up for questions
now. Ok. Bueno, hay una pregunta diciendo cómo se puede parar el asesinato de líderes sociales. Supongo esta pregunta irá para ambos. ¿Quién quiere ir primero, Víctor o Iván?
¿Quieres, Víctor, comenzar? Yo ya he hablado largo ahora, así que me parece que es buen lugar.
Okay. The first issue is that we should pressure the government to admit that this is that's a systematic practice in the Colombian issue. It's not isolated cases. You know, the first thing is to recognize and to push the government to admit that this is going on. Second one, to take into account the reports made by the human rights organization related to the dynamics. Who has been killed? The leader of the Black communities who is fighting in favor of the land, the people who is fighting for the restitution of land to the IDPs, the internal displaced people, the leader of the communities affected by the armed conflict, especially in some difficult areas, and the people who is fighting against the mining practice, like the mining companies in Colombian territory, the people who is fighting against the appropriation of land by the biggest companies and the land owners. Means this is clear profile of people that has been killed. It's important to know that someone is killing them, of course, but the most important is who is giving the order, who is behind the curtain. And this is a political responsibility. And one of the biggest things that you can help us is to denounce in the international arena what is going on. And second, to push for the political responsibility, the criminal responsibility for the political leaders. You remember what was going on in the Yugoslavian case, especially with Milosevic. The discussion was that Milosevic had a clear responsibility as a political leader. And I see that you should help us to push in this direction.
Bueno, yo simplemente agregaría algo a eso que ha dicho Víctor, con lo que estoy de acuerdo, y es que tenemos que ganar las elecciones y crear un gobierno favorable a la paz. Este gobierno es un gobierno adversario y enemigo de la paz. Dice que no lo es, pero lo es. Entonces tenemos que ganar las fuerzas de la paz las elecciones para poder proteger a los líderes, implementar el acuerdo, hacer otro acuerdo de paz con el ELN, hacer una reforma agraria real, resolver el problema de la droga, de las drogas ilegales de una manera distinta, hacer respetar nuestra soberanía como país. Ese es un problema político, por supuesto. Ahora, puede ser que no ganemos las elecciones, ¿no? Es posible que no ganemos las elecciones. Y entonces tenemos que seguir resistiendo. Pero bueno, esa es parte del juego de la política, por supuesto.
Okay, yes, Ivan would like to add something else to what Victor has said. He will add that we have to win the elections, the upcoming elections, and have a government that will be willing to support the peace efforts in Colombia, the peace process, and obviously foster the dialogues between the government and the ELN. Obviously, one of the main constraints at this moment is that we have a government that says it is not against peace, but surely they are against peace. So Ivan says that the most important thing at this moment will be winning the elections. That will be the only way. And if we do not win the elections, then we will continue our resistance and fight for peace. Do you want to continue, Lisa, or should I read the other question? Let me just check.
Read the other questions, Angelo.
Just give me a moment. I'll read what's the other question. Can you see the other question? Can't see it.
One is related to the role of the drugs issues in the Colombian conflict, something like that. Yeah,
there are so many. Yeah, so let's tackle that one. I can see that one, but then yeah, let's talk about that one. I'm sorry, what's the question about the role of drugs in Colombia?
Yes, it's like I mean, how Hollywood present or highlight Colombia as a drugs arena, but not too much about the conflict and either of the peace process. In this regard, I just wanted to mention that we can say like drugs is a gasoline of the conflict, but this is not the original cause of the conflict. One of the biggest problems is to put in a historical perspective. It's true that almost all the actors in the Colombian conflict has been involved in drugs issues, or the production, or the plantation, or the distribution. This is a matter of another discussion. Even the state has received a lot of money and has a lot of investigations going on about the links between the drugs cartel and the army, but also they feed the paramilitary budget. But despite of it, what I would like to remark is, please, you have to take into account the drugs issues, but not to focus or not to put the origin of our conflict in the drug issues. As you may remember, the war in Liberia associated with diamonds, or the Congo associated with coltan. But please don't limitate our conflict to the drugs issues. Of course, this is an important point, but this is only one more point. Second one to take into account is that the responsibility of the international community about drug discussion. Why is more expensive to produce sugar than to produce cocaine? I'm not kidding, seriously. Sugar is more expensive and more complex chemical process to produce sugar than to produce cocaine. Why cocaine is so expensive? Because it's illegal. And all this discussion about the legalization or not of the drugs, or about the international fight against the drugs, is a big issue. It's not matter only of the farmers producing coca leaves in the small area of Colombia. Is that more than 95% of the money goes to the international banks, go to the international financial circuits. We put the blood, but we don't get the money.
Okay, thank you, Victor. No sé si Iván quieras agregar algo en esta pregunta.
Diría que este es un problema estratégico, por supuesto. El poder político en Estados Unidos ha utilizado el problema del narcotráfico como un instrumento de intervención permanente. Y yo diría de colonialismo, de la política y la economía de varios países en la región, no solo de Colombia. Y hay un interés por mantener esta guerra. Esta también es una guerra. Así que hay un discurso absolutamente hipócrita y hay una política real de mantener la guerra, la llamada guerra contra el narcotráfico.
Okay, this is an strategic problem because the political parties in the US, they have used this issue of the narco-traffic pretty much as an excuse to perpetrate colonialism, not only in Colombia, but pretty much in the Latin American region. With this hypocrisy discourse, the United States wants to keep these efforts or this war in not only in Colombia, but essentially in Latin America, so they can still control it.
No hay una política de cooperación sobre este problema. Es una política totalmente unilateral. Colombia tiene que extraditar a Estados Unidos a los narcotraficantes colombianos, pero no hay un solo caso, uno solo hasta ahora, de un narcotraficante que distribuya drogas en las calles de Miami o de Nueva York que está extraditado en Colombia.
Okay, and there is a policy. I'm sorry, just give me a moment.
No hay una política de cooperación.
Yeah, there is no cooperation policy between the United States and Colombia. It has been a completely unilateral policy. We have seen that whenever a narco traffic in Colombia is caught, we have to deport them to United States or to extradite them to United States. But you won't see, there is no single case of someone being extradited from Miami for selling drugs in Miami to Colombia.
Colombia pone los muertos, pone la destrucción del campesinado, pone su prestigio o su falta de prestigio internacional, y Estados Unidos lo único que hace es decirnos si lo estamos haciendo bien o no lo estamos haciendo bien. Estados Unidos certifica o no certifica a Colombia todos los años si está cumpliendo o no con la política de lucha contra las drogas, pero Colombia nunca ha pensado en certificar o no a Estados Unidos sobre si está controlando el mercado del consumo de drogas.
Okay, Colombia puts the deaths and the destruction of farmers, and just give me a moment, and the only thing that USA does is that they issue an annual report and they say if Colombia is doing good or is doing bad, but we never say if actually Colombia never says if actually United States is doing good in controlling the issue or not.
Por eso es que el punto del acuerdo de paz, de un tratamiento y de un enfoque distinto del problema del narcotráfico, es tan importante. Y por eso es tan difícil de implementar, porque si se implementa ese punto, se acaba la guerra contra las drogas, por supuesto.
That's why this part of the peace agreement that aims to tackle the different approach to the narco traffic is so hard to implement, because if we do implement it, surely the war against drugs will come to an end.
Por eso es que el problema de la implementación no es solamente un problema del gobierno colombiano, es que hay fuerzas internacionales que no quieren que se aplique debidamente el acuerdo de paz en Colombia.
That's why the issue of implementing the Colombian peace agreement is not only a Colombian issue, but this is an international issue, as there are forces behind that are not interested in having this to happen.
Por eso es que han llegado tropas élite a asesorar al ejército colombiano en las zonas donde se debería estar implementando el acuerdo de paz. Ese es parte del problema de por qué ahora hay una llegada de tropas extranjeras a Colombia.
I can barely hear. Así no se te está cortando, Iván.
Digo que es,
Qué pena,
por
pero
eso
se te
también se
está
explica que
cortando.
hay, digo, por eso también se explica que hay tropas extranjeras en Colombia hoy en los territorios donde se debe implementar el acuerdo de paz.
Okay, so that's why there are elite troops from the United States in those territories where we are meant to implement the peace agreement. That's his intervention. Shall we pick up another question?
Angelo, I think you should make this the last one.
Yes.
Because we should close within about 5 minutes. And I know you want to say something by way of a conclusion. And I want to thank our friends.
Yeah, I was checking the questions. Some of the questions, actually, Iván did cover them in his last intervention, and Victor as well. So I'm just trying to pick up something different. Okay, so this one. There is a question. This will be the last question. It says that some of the money that has been designated to the peace agreement is going elsewhere. And apparently that's money that's missing. How we avoid that? Traduciré la pregunta para Iván también. Hay una pregunta que nos dice que parece que se están desviando dineros de la implementación del proceso de paz. ¿Cómo podemos evitar que pase esto? Esa es la pregunta. Who wants to go first? Victor?
Bueno, en Colombia tenemos un estado en el que se practican múltiples formas de corrupción. Es más, ya no se habla de corrupción, sino de captura de mafias del Estado colombiano. Y por supuesto que el acuerdo de paz y
Okay, in Colombia we have a...
circunstancia.
Okay, sorry. In Colombia, we have a state in which we have many cases of corruption. And at this moment, we are talking about mafias in the corruption, as well in politically talking.
Los recursos son pocos para el proceso de paz, pero y así están siendo objeto de distintas actividades ilegales y de intento de ser capturados por ese tipo de sectores mafiosos dentro del Estado.
Okay, the resources for the peace agreement are few. Even though at few, there are some mafias, political mafias that are still using those few resources.
Y ahora con la pandemia, por supuesto que ese problema se hace todavía más agudo, porque se quieren desviar los pocos recursos que hay para la paz supuestamente a atender otras necesidades que hay en medio de esta crisis.
Okay, and now with the COVID-19 crisis, it gets stronger, this issue, as the government will use this as an excuse in order to reorientate those resources to supposedly another sectors.
Así que, además de los mecanismos de control internos y de la labor que debemos hacer quienes tenemos responsabilidades en el Congreso de la República y en las organizaciones sociales, también la comunidad internacional a la que pertenecen muchos de esos recursos debe ejercer una auditoría muy fuerte sobre esos dineros, por supuesto. Con eso termino.
Okay, so as well, the internal mechanisms of Colombia that are in charge of overseeing the proper usage of those resources, and as well the international community has to keep an eye on those resources and how they are being used. And with that, Iván finishes his intervention. Do you want to say something, Victor?
Well, yes, I would like to finish with some optimistic message, thinking about Lisa and Ivan. No, I just want to remark 5 things that are really relevant to take into account when we analyze the Colombian peace process. First of all, is the decreasing of the political violence in some areas. This is not a small issue. And I remember when the ELN, National Liberation Army, declared a ceasefire, we have a huge, wonderful Christmas period with peace with FARC and with the ceasefire with the ELN, and people were really happy. Maybe we undermine sometimes what it means for the communities to be, after decades of armed conflict, celebrating together in peace. This is not a small issue, and I really want to underline this issue. The second one is the identification of the real issues of the Colombian conflict, of the real agenda. As you may know, in some conflicts, they divert the debate to another point, like terrorism, for instance, in the Palestinian case. If you don't go directly to the real agenda, you don't catch what is going on. And I see that the discussion about agricultural issues, political participation in the public arena, in the public discussion in the Colombian society is really a big success. The other is some kind of wake up of the civil society. Despite that, I think that the mobilization in favor of peace has some limitations. Anyway, it exists and has been stronger day by day, and this is also important issues. Something that I want to that already mentioned by Ivan is like the transitional justice as a model. I mean, this is not impunity in the Colombian process. If you analyze the peace process in everywhere, including Africa and some experience in Asia, and in Colombia, this attempt, really honest, not to give any kind of impunity, is a big effort made for the process. It's a complicated structure, I know, but this is something that should be taken into account for another experience. And finally, the recognition of victims. This is not a small issue. You remember that the process before the 90s, I mean, the peace process in Salvador, Guatemala, or Ireland, was not accompanied with a good recognition of victims. In Colombia, we have even a big paradox issue, because we have, how to build peace in the time of the International Criminal Court, how to bring peace, respecting international requirement of justice by the Geneva Conventions, by the international human rights law. And this balance was really positive, and especially to get a recognition of the victims. And I think that these 5 elements allow us to be a little bit more optimistic in the way that Lisa was pushing the discussion.
Thank you. Let me answer that before I leave to Angelo to make his concluding remarks. Thank you very much, Victor. But thank you also, Ivan. This is what I was trying to say at the beginning, that when I first read the Colombian peace agreement, I found it such a wonderful, it was like a dream to me compared to the peace agreements that I had experienced at the end of other wars. So I am still there, and we're still there to help out. And let's get together and see how we can work on international campaigns of international peace movements and civil society to support the specific issues of the land reform, of the victim recognition, of the transitional justice, all those elements that are so unique and so exceptional in the Colombia Peace Accord that the whole world really must put great effort into supporting it and to see it properly implemented. Thank you again, both of you. You've been wonderful.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, for your comments. Yes, I think one of the main points, and this is something I've been discussing with Iván, on how we can cooperate from now on, and particularly with the GCAMS campaign, with the global campaign on military spending. As we all know, Iván, with 7 congressmen and women, they issued a request to the Colombian government to reallocate some of the military spending, and that money actually was approved by the Minister of Defense in April 21st. They did approve $25 million to the attention of the COVID-19 crisis. So I think this will be a very good start point to cooperate from the International Peace Bureau, the movement of Let's Defend the Peace, which Iván is co-founder of this movement. I think the cooperation should be good from now on with Iván, and as well with Victor, who is as well quite involved in the peace movement in Colombia. Final remarks, well, first I wanted to thank Iván and Victor for their time, for being here. And well, I always have said that the Colombian peace process means hope to the world. It means hope to other armed conflicts, because still, if our peace process is very ambitious, and that's why it's as well very hard to implement it, the Colombian peace process is the most comprehensive peace agreement ever signed. And if we are able to succeed, that will mean a lot of hope to the entire world. So I think Colombia definitely can make history if we are able to achieve this task. Obviously, this will require time. As we have seen in other countries, the time is different. Just for example, the armed conflict that was happening in Northern Ireland took several years to be implemented. And Colombia has to get rid of pretty much 50 years of hate, 50 years of narco traffic, of interest behind the country in order to perpetrate war. And as I always have said, as I'm a disarmament activist, I believe living in a world of weapons will always bring us armed conflict, because this business of weapons have to be kept. If there are no conflicts, how will we use those weapons? I mean, how we will keep that business? Thousands, millions of people will go bankrupt, and millions of weapons manufacturers will go bankrupt. So I think the main element will be to shut down those manufacturers of weapons and find alternatives to the economy in which we can reallocate and find new jobs for all that people, because weapons are made only for killing, and that's the reality. Weapons for peace do not exist. Weapons for security do not exist. I think we have to change this false narrative of what security is and how do we deal with threats of terrorism. And that requires education. That requires changing that mindset that our governments have told us about how to deal with those issues. In Colombia, it's not the case. There is a huge labor to do to educate people, and as well to change that narrative of violence that has been in our hearts for so long. So forgiveness has to be there as well. I want to finish with those remarks. And I'll give the floor again to Lisa, the final comments and conclusion then. Thank you.
I think we'll leave it. Thank you, Angelo. I think we'll leave it there just by saying once again, thank you very much, Victor. Thank you very much, Iván. And we will be working together in the future. I hope that we can put together a proper coalition of peace movements and civil society groups to support the Colombia Peace Accord. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gracias, adiós.
Chao.
Chao, Víctor, el optimista.
Gracias. Bye, Iván. Chao, Iván.
Chao.
Chao.